Welcome to My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. If you're like most people, you've spent your entire life focusing on the demands of parenting, of relationships, of your livelihood. Much like you've been riding in a life-powered bobsled, leaning into what others expect of you. But I'm here to help you reclaim your life. I want to embolden you to raise your hand today and every day and say, "It's my turn." Hello, everyone. I'm Rikki Schwartz, and you are listening to It's My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life on Transformation Talk Radio. And welcome to my flagship show, already with an error in the first sentence. So we're off to a great start. I'm so excited to be here. So stay with us for the next hour, and let's see if we can begin to plant the seeds of reclaiming your life to take root. And then please join us the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month, same time, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where my expert guests and I will do our very best to give you the tools you'll need to finally say, "It's my turn." Today's guest is Jeff Nischwitz. He's the founder of the Nischwitz Group, dedicated to the transformation of people and organizations, co-founder of Cartavera, a leadership development ecosystem, a personal transformation coach, as am I, and the author of 5 books, including the one we're going to talk about today, titled Unmask, Let Go of Who You Are Supposed to Be, and Unleash Your True Leader. Welcome to My Turn Life Coaching, Jeff, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Rikki. I am so giddy already. And,
Me too.
I was listening to the intro and they're talking about the bobsled, and I just had a former bobsled pilot as a podcast guest a couple months ago.
Oh, that's excellent. I just felt
like what are the lessons from that?
The leaning in made me feel like how we go through life sometimes. So that's where I came up with that metaphor.
Well, and to add to it, what he shared was how important it is to be willing to fail, because as the pilot, you can't find your edge until you're willing to go past it. And you got to be willing to wipe out hard to learn. Otherwise you'll be too conservative. You play it safe.
Thank you, Jeff. See, already a pearl, guys. So in an effort to fast track a connection between my guests and my listeners, I'm always going to begin every interview with the same question. So Jeff, what are your personal core values, and in particular, the ones that align with our interview today?
Well, they all align. And I'm glad you're asking me this question today in 2021, because if you'd asked me this in 2010, this time, I would have said, I don't know. I want to be a good person.
Yeah, that's I ask my clients the same question at the beginning of every coaching session, and almost inevitably they say, I want to be a good mom. I want to be a good person. I want to be a good dad. So you're not alone then in 2000.
But today I have answers, because I learned for myself how vital they are to give me this light to follow and a way to make decisions and to assess my day. So I have 5. They are integrity. Integrity for me is not just about being honest. It's about alignment, in that my thoughts, my words, and my actions all line up, because when they don't, then I feel like I'm out of alignment and I lack integrity. So integrity. One is accountability, which is another form of integrity to me. Do I honor my commitments? Do I make clear commitments? Do I meet those commitments? And when I don't, do I take real personal responsibility and learn from it to do better next time? Mm-hmm. So integrity, accountability, authenticity. And authenticity goes with the next one, which is vulnerability. And they're different for me. So vulnerability is my willingness to take risk and to allow someone to experience me. And the authenticity is when they do, that it's the real me. And it ties into the integrity as well. So I want to be vulnerable. I want to be authentic, accountable, have integrity. And the last one is unconditional love. And what that means for me is starting with me, and certainly with others, to either eliminate as much as possible my judgments of others, to accept people as they are. And when I find myself judging to catch it, acknowledge it, release it, and then get back to that place of just witnessing others versus labeling and judging them. So that's my 5.
I like, what one struck me the most is, I think the hardest one is not judging, right? Of course, the hardest one is going to be accepting people as they are. That one really goes against the grain. What I've recently started terming that is, maybe it's because I'm being tricky, meeting people where they are. So not expecting them to be anything different, not necessarily loving it, but meeting them where we are to get done whatever we need to get done. If it's friendship, if it's colleague, if it's work or whatever. So I think that one comes more naturally to me. I do tend to see the world as I am instead of as it is. So I will say that judgment might be a little tiny piece of something that I'm working on all the time. So that's as close as I've gotten.
Yeah,
So
well, it's funny you say that because so many people say, yeah, I don't judge anybody. And I just call them out. I said, wow, so you ceased being human?
Yeah.
It's a natural thing we do so fast that you can't stop it.
Exactly.
The question is, do you catch it,
Yep.
acknowledge it, and let it go, not pretend it doesn't exist?
That is much more natural to me and probably to others. So I like that a lot. I do. And I think it's interesting that, the whole point of my life coaching business, the whole point of this radio show is to help people transform, to help them make changes, to help them get unstuck. And it's ironic that you brought up and I brought up core values, because as I said, when I'm teaching life coaching, when I'm doing life coaching, that's the first question I ask. And if we can't get to those answers, we could spend 3, 4, 5 sessions just narrowing down what those core values are, because without them, you don't know your passion. You don't know your niche. You don't know whether you're doing what you want to be doing. So I asked them, if you died tomorrow, what do you want people to say at your memorial service? What do you want them to say? And if you don't know and they don't know, you haven't found your place yet. So yeah. I'm really glad we covered those.
One of my best friends named Matt, he's very direct with people, and he meets strangers. And one of the first questions he asks is, so what's your personal mission? Which I also have. And most of them say, same thing. I want to be a nice person, good parent. I don't know, like that. So they really don't have one. And he just comes right back and says, well, so how do you live your life every day?
Yeah.
And it's like so simple that if you don't have that clarity, how do you make decisions? How do you interact?
And you know what the answer is? Bobsledding.
Yeah, without a wheel. It's bobsledding, but you don't have a steering wheel.
It's just, I'm going where gravity takes me. And that's what I try to get my clients to understand. You might regret that in the years to come. So let's see if we can get you to drive the bobsled.
Right.
Okay. Loved your book. Loved your book. Again, for listeners, it's called Unmask, Let Go of Who You Are Supposed to Be and Unleash Your True Leader. And I think I loved it, and I think everybody's going to have a different reason for loving any book, is because it didn't sugarcoat the heavy lifting, then the power, the willpower it's going to take to make different choices. It makes me think of when I used to watch The Biggest Loser on TV. And in a way, they kind of glamorized the exercise. Clearly, they didn't look like they were comfortable, but it was like, I can do that. I want to do that. I want to sweat and grunt like they are. And then I do it for 5 minutes and go, this sucks. This is horrible. This is very uncomfortable. So you and I are in the untenable position of getting people, first of all, to realize it's hard work and then get comfortable with the discomfort. So that's why I liked the book. So let's start with the concept, the biggest concept, LIVINGSHIP. What is LIVINGSHIP and why does it matter?
A living ship, first of all, is a made up word. I made it up, and that's what I love about writing and speaking. You just make stuff up if we don't have a good word for it. And where it came from is over the years, I constantly heard people talk about, well, there's this different versions of me. There's the work me, there's the family me, there's the personal me. This is how I am here. I said, wait a minute. Are you like a split personality or something? And people are really attached to the idea that there's differences. And at the same time, everybody seems to be on this path of searching for what I think is literally the purple unicorn, which is so-called work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in that because balance to me suggests perfect balance, like everything's equal, but it never will be. So I said, well, what if we looked at our lives as an integration? And how about if we built our lives, every part of it, number one, recognizing that we are one person, and that however we are somewhere else is probably how we're going to show up here. It just might look different. And what if instead of trying to find balance, we found integration and brought everything together So living ship is a way of saying, well, you know what? Most people label leadership as a business thing. In fact, you and I talked about that, right? Oh, if you say leadership, they're going to think this is about business.
Yeah.
But we have to lead our lives every day. So living ship is really saying leadership holistically in our lives, in our relationships, in our work, our career, whatever it is. That's what we do when we look at it all together and we see it as a whole, not as separate pieces.
That's excellent. I don't know a human being on the planet, myself included, who doesn't regret that we don't have better life-work balance. Now, in my case, since my work is everything to me, I don't feel that imbalance is a problem for me because I simply love to do it. But for people who don't love their jobs, I think living ship is a very important tenet for them.
Well, I think there's a trap in that too, Rikki, because I deeply love what I do. And what I realized the outcome is that I can work all the time because I love it. And I wasn't creating space for me and just some downtime and frankly, just fun beyond work.
Yeah.
And so I realized there's a trap that I was actually working harder than I wanted,
Yeah.
sacrificing myself, saying, oh, but I love it. So that's that idea of, well, just because I love it doesn't mean I want to do it 18 hours a day.
And I think there's no doubt that no matter how much you love to work, it is exhausting on your brain, on your body, and so forth. You do need to shift your brain to other topics besides the same thing. So I totally get that. So we're going to take a break in about a minute. Tell me, Jeff, of what we've talked about so far in the first segment, is there anything you wanted to reiterate before we take a break?
I think I just add one quick thing to what you said. You talked about how hard it is. And my experience is that hard and easy are the wrong question. What we want to do is find some simplicity to the path. And everybody's going to be different in terms of how hard, how easy, how fast, how slow. Transformation can happen in an instant. And sometimes bigger transformation takes longer, but it can happen so fast and people are overwhelmed by the concept. And I love what you said. Just let people understand that transformation can happen. And are you willing to be really uncomfortable to let it happen?
Yeah, understood. Okay, well, let's take a break and we'll be back in about 3 minutes and we'll start back up and chat more about unmasking. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. And we're talking about one of Jeff Nischwitz's book. He's a 5-time author and transformation expert. And the name of the book we're talking today is Unmask, Let Go of Who You Are Supposed to Be and Unleash Your True Leader. Before we jump back in, I want to remind any of our Facebook Live guests that we welcome any questions or comments you have. Plop those in the comments field. Or you can call the studio while we're airing to speak with myself or Jeff. That number 800-930-2819. 800-930-2819. Also, I want to make sure that everyone knows how to contact Jeff once the interview is over. Jeff, can you please give the listeners your contact information?
Oh, sweet and easy. All you have to do is be able to spell my last name, which is N as in Nancy, ISCHWITZ, Nischwitzgroup.com or Jeff@Nischwitzgroup.com. Easy peasy.
Spelling Nischwitz wasn't as difficult for me as saying it 3 times fast.
Well, that's why we practice.
Okay, let's dive back in. In your book, you spend a lot of time talking about the role and impact, based on the title, no surprise, of masks in our lives. So tell us a little bit more about what that means. Dive a little deeper into it in the limited time we have. What do you mean when you say unmask?
Well, most people get it pretty quickly, although I have to chuckle because I was on a call with my speaker mastermind group yesterday. And they said, Jeff, have you thought about republishing your book during COVID? Everybody's talking about masks. Those are not the kind of masks we're talking about. I'm talking about the masks that we wear in our life. We've heard a lot in the last few years, the idea of imposter syndrome, and a lot of people coming out, and I love it, acknowledging that so many people deal with that. And that's where they feel like an imposter. So they have to present a certain way. And we have all these masks that we wear. And there's this mask I wear at work, or the mask I wear in relationships, or with my children, or my partner, or even someone I change how I am in a conversation to be something like I think will be acceptable to them. And what I thought about is not only do we wear these masks, but they're exhausting. And sometimes we're not even sure which one we're wearing. And when I started telling people, I said, how do the masks feel? And they said two things. They feel safe, but they're exhausting. And I said, so what's for you is the core? Why do you wear a mask? And everybody said the same thing. I'm terrified to let people see who I really am. And this fear is very real, Rikki. And I've realized why as I was writing the book. When I wear a mask with you, if you judged me in a way that I don't like, you judged my mask, not me. But if I don't wear a mask with you, every judgment you make is about the most authentic me. And that I get how that's terrifying. If you reject my authentic self, that is the deepest experience we can have. Now, I'm not here to tell you that people won't have a judgment of you. We do have judgments. What I've told people is the choice you need to make is, do you want to be judged? Because you're going to be judged on who you actually are or who you pretend to be. And some people say, I'll take the pretend. Well, they're not ready to do the work, and that's okay. They're choosing to play it safe. But here's the reality. You're still going to get judgments that you may not like from that direction. I've decided to be judged by who I am. And sometimes I'll tell you, recently I had an experience where I was very vulnerable and authentic with someone. They judged that and it hurt. So this is not about not hurting, but what I've learned in my life, I'd rather feel the hurt and embrace the sweetness that it's a real emotion than to play games and pretend, because the masks are exhausting. And I'm sure I still have them. I think what happens is they get thinner.
Yeah.
And I'm more clear and I'm slower to put them on. And I can the big thing is the slower I am to put them on, I have more time to make a choice to not put them on.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of unmasking.
Oprah Winfrey used to say that when she hit 50, she really stopped caring what people thought. 50 is not a young age, by the way, at least by some terms. So I noticed that as I get older, I am masking less, but I don't know that I've taken the time to make the concerted effort to completely unmask. I know with age, I'm a little bit more comfortable. I don't mask as much, but I would love to say I am unmasked completely, but that would not be true.
Well, I don't think anything is fully done. And like when someone says I wear no mask, I go, whoa, really? Or I love this one. People will say, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. When I hear it that way, I go, that feels dangerous. That feels like narcissistic, because we all care at some level. The question is, what are we doing with the caring? And we can become quite brutal when we decide that we don't care. It's not about brutality. It's about just being okay with ourselves and saying, I'm going to just let you see me and you're going to choose what you do with that. And it's okay.
I have one friend, the one who did my webpage for My Turn Life Coaching, in case she's listening. And she says a lot, I don't care what people think of me. I don't care. And what I usually assess that to be is, that's your mask. I don't believe it for a minute. Yeah. I believe it's a mask you wear so that you don't get hurt. So I think there's a lot of elements to what does it really mean to say you don't care when people think.
Yeah, I think it is another mask. And to me, the danger of that mask is, if I wear a mask, it protects myself in theory, whether it does or not, in theory. But when I have that mask of, I don't care what you think, I usually end up beating people with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's a forcible smack in the face of, hey, I don't care what you think. Boom.
And she also, to dive just a little deeper into it without being her psychotherapist, which I am too often, I'm sure by her standards, she's attracting people who want to be with someone who doesn't care what they think. So they don't treat her very well. So I think it opens up the doors for a lot of problems for her and others, I'm sure.
Well, and I think another thing, frankly, is when I say that, I'm skipping the work.
Yeah.
Because the work is recognizing that I wear masks and taking a look at why I wear them and being willing to love myself enough.
Yeah.
And see myself as enough, just as I am, to say I'm willing to take them off. But if I don't, then I'm saying, do you see yourself as enough? Probably not.
Yeah.
You put up this wall called I don't care.
I couldn't agree more. So in the next 5 minutes before our next break, I want to touch on the different types of stories. You talk about stories in your book. You talk about story debunking. So in 5 minutes or so, let's go over what you mean by that.
Yeah, I'll give roughly a minute to each. So as I was writing the book, I realized I was using the word stories a lot. And then people were saying, well, aren't there different kinds of stories? There are. And then people use their lazy, I call it lazy labels of, well, there's good stories and bad stories. I don't like good and bad. I don't like positive or negative. They're just stories. So I came up with 5 times. So 5 types. One is they're event stories. These are the things that happen in our life and we tell a story about them. It could be a story about, I went to the beach. That's a story of my life. Or it could be the story of how I went from being a lawyer to being a speaker and transformation coach. That's a story. So these are just a description that's often not all facts. There's different things in it, but it's a story about a journey we've had. So that's the event story. The second one is cultural stories. And cultural stories are these things that we typically accept that come from our culture or society. So for example, a lot of people in our culture will say, you don't want to get your hopes up because you're going to get hurt or disappointed. Well, that's a cultural story that's based upon trying to protect people, again, from hurt. And, frankly, some of our cultural stories we dealt with in 2020 in a very difficult way around racism and all sorts of different social justice issues, because there are cultural stories about differences between people that get perpetrated, right?
Yes.
And then we have belief stories. Now, belief stories are the stories that are often gifted to us, I say in quotes, by people that care about us, but they end up being things we believe about ourselves. So, I get my clothes dirty and my mother says, oh my God, you can't go out like that. So now I form a belief that I have to always look good in order to be accepted. And now that feeds into all sorts of things. So we could spend a day on the belief stories. Then we have I call them the created stories. And these are the stories that we create from these other events, usually about ourselves. So my story, the short version is that I didn't believe I was loved growing up, especially by my father. That led to a story that I am not lovable. Okay. I'm not lovable, which created a mess of a life until I started doing that work. And then there's the blocking stories. And the blocking stories are the stories we make up to protect ourselves. And so an example would be taking that one about not being lovable. I won't connect with someone and I will make up stories that I'll basically discount everyone, because if I let them in, they're not going to find out that I'm not lovable, and then they're going to reject me and I'll lose them again. So I keep myself safe by creating a blocking story that says, let's say it's you, Rikki. You know what? Rikki just doesn't get me. So I'm going to walk away from that because I'm not going to let her in. And most of these are about protection. So those are the 5 kinds of stories. And the story debunker was a label that was given to me, which is really the nature of my work, to help people debunk the stories they have about themselves. Because debunking is basically saying, not only is it not true, let's show how it's showing up in your life, why it's showing up, what you're getting out of it. And are you now willing to let go of that win to have what you really want, is a more authentic, rich life? Just it's all of you.
Have you ever had a client that didn't have any of those stories?
I've had a number of clients who started off by saying they didn't. And that is actually, if you want to go into that when we get back, I can tell you a real life story about how that showed up in a very unfortunate way. But it was someone who insisted that they had none of these stories. And an hour later, it had gotten ugly. Literally an hour later from the conversation.
Gosh, I don't know if we have time next segment, but if we do, I want to sneak that in because that's fascinating. So I think we've got about 20 seconds or so before the break. Anything you'd like to throw out there before we take our 3 minutes?
The big piece I would say is that we all have stories, and those stories are big. We got those stories from people and situations who were trying to do the best they could to help us. They were loving and intent most of the time. It's what we made those stories and events mean about ourselves that we have to unwrap. And every time we unwrap a story, transformation happens. That's the reality.
That's fascinating. When I read that in the book, I don't think I made some personal connections as I am right now. Maybe I'm more of an audiobook kind of girl. But that really resonated with me when you said it that way. We're going to take a break. And when we do, Jeff, we're going to talk about your 5 foundations of LIVINGSHIP from your book. And let's take
awesome.
a 3-minute break. First of all, I want to say thank you, Megan Keller, for your kind comment in Facebook. I smiled from ear to ear when I saw it. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. I have Jeff Nischwitz here talking about his book, Unmask, Let Go of Who You Are Supposed to Be and Unleash Your True Leader. In this segment, Jeff, I want to talk about your 5 foundations of LIVINGSHIP. And again, you've got about 12 minutes, so divide 5 into that and see how close you can come. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, Rikki, like all authors, you need to come up with a list. And you're either going to come up with an acronym or you're going to do something. And I came up with 5 A's, but it wasn't made up because I think I had 4 of them. And if you'll notice, I cheated on one because that's what authors do. And I'll let you know which one I cheated on. So the 5 foundations are this, and I'll show you how they work together. And there's also almost a progression to them. They do overlap, but there's a bit of a progression at the beginning. The first is that we have to be awake. And this can be an awakening event in our life. Some people have said that they decided to make changes in their life when they maybe hit bottom or they had this situation. And it's sort of like that. They got shaken by life and they said, what's going on? I want to change something. Another form of awakening is where we make a decision that we just said, I'm fed up with what I'm experiencing. I want to change it. That's an awakening and a willingness to take a look at it. And the third case is sometimes we make a change in our life that creates an awakening where we see things around us. And many years ago, I was talking to a guy who had been super successful in his life in sales. He left and started his own business and was epically failing and couldn't figure out why. And we had a long talk, a coaching session on the phone. And at the end, he said, Jeff, I feel like I've walked through my whole life and now I woke up and everything's different around me. And I told him, I said, here's the truth. Nothing has changed around you. You just didn't see it before. Nothing changes. It's as almost the blinders came up or off and you go, oh my God, this is how I really feel about myself. This is my belief system. So in some way, there needs to be an awakening. We got to be willing to be awake. And here's the thing I don't know for sure. I go back and forth. Once we wake up, can we go back to sleep? Yeah. My belief is we can't. But what we can do is we can extend our medication. We can medicate ourselves more with drugs, alcohol, work, distractions, whatever we're binging on, food, infidelity, gambling, whatever it is, we medicate our lives with busyness.
I feel like an awakening could lead to those things. Awakenings hurt. What do we do when we're hurt? We medicate.
But see, here's what I believe about it. And that's why the second one is awareness, because working on our self-awareness, because if we have that wake-up moment, it can feed us to say, now what do I do? I'm uncomfortable, but if I medicate, I'm less uncomfortable, but I'm going to probably be more uncomfortable more often if I choose to stay awake, which means I'm going to step into choosing to be aware, which means asking myself questions regularly, maybe getting a coach, inviting questions from people around me to help me grow my awareness, because awareness is about bringing things, what I call out of the shadow, out of the unconscious, and they're called blind spots. But we need help to bring them out into the light. And that's really a commitment to being aware. And awareness sucks sometimes, because sometimes I don't want to know that. I thought this was just something I did. And then I go, oh my God, it's actually driven by this. And I'm tired of this. Isn't it done? And so I tell people it's a journey. It's probably never done, but it does get simpler and easier and less discomfortable as you go. So we're going to be awake. We're going to commit to awareness. The third is authenticity. Authenticity. We've got to be willing to be ourselves in order to live our fuller life as we're meant to be. And I call it tapping into our authentic power. Like a lot of people say they're confident, but they're wearing a mask. So it's this faux confidence. But when they're willing to do the work and wake up, work on themselves, become more aware, and be vulnerable enough to live authentically, that power is unstoppable. And every person, that's what I tell them, every person is unstoppable if you're willing to be vulnerable and authentic. May not happen overnight, but that is the journey. Now, the fourth one is my cheat, because the fourth one is about accountability. But the key to it is it's about self-accountability. So that's my little cheat.
Got it.
It's about accountability, which is saying, I'm going to be a person who consistently honors my commitments. And when I don't, I'm going to take personal responsibility. And here's the hard part about accountability. Once you claim it, there's no more space for victimhood. You can't blame anything or anyone. Blaming and accountability cannot coexist. And so if you choose that path, you got to get rid of all those comfortable things like, well, I could blame you and I could say this happened and I always got an out. Well, you don't have any more out cards. And that one is the one there's some authenticity in it, but boy, that one, everybody thinks they're really accountable until you ask the people around them.
Yeah, I know.
No, they're not. And the last one is another made up word. I know I made up at least 2 words in this book. I can't believe this one's not a word though. The word is actionized. And what that means is to take all these beliefs and shifts, but put them into new action. Because what I have found is at times in my life and clients I've worked with, we can fall in love with our self-awareness. And it'll be like, oh, wait a minute. I just screamed at my son. You know what that's about? Because he was tapping into challenging my authority. And that's that part that I need to be in control because I have some worthiness issues. Man, I'm really aware of that. But then I do it again tomorrow and the next day.
Yep.
And I'll say, bullshit.
Yep.
This is about changing how you show up, not perfectly because we'll be imperfect, but it's not about just knowing something. It's about putting that into action. And that's what I call actionized. So awake, aware, authentic, accountable, and actionized.
A lot of these remind me, one of my favorite easy reads is The 4 Agreements. I'm sure you've read it, if not.
Don Miguel, baby.
I mean, I truly have it on my wall and I look up at it with great regularity and I'm constantly reminding myself, both professionally and personally. And these resonate with those agreements for sure. And again, when you first read the book, you're like, yeah, I'm accountable. I live up to my commitments and yeah, I do my personal best all the time. And yeah, and then when you become more aware and self-aware, you're like, oh, hell, I still have a ways to go. So
then you got the killer. You got the killer one, which teaches all of them, which is it's not personal.
Don't take things personally.
Because everything in my life, I've realized everything in my life that I have a reaction to, the reaction is because I made it personal.
Absolutely.
That one is just like, it's so real. I get it. And it just creeps up and smacks me in the face all the time.
We have triggers. We're not going to be able to outlive them. I think he will even say, if somebody in his book, if someone stares you in the face and says, you are a stupid cow, it's not about you. It's about them and their day. How hard is that to remember when you're being called a stupid cow? So, but I think it's the most powerful one because it releases you from their crap. You got enough crap to carry around on your own. Let's release what's not have anything, probably has nothing to do with you.
Well, and you may know this, Rikki, I love movies. And one of the great lessons about that personal piece is in the movie Roadhouse. That's a crappy movie, but everybody loves Roadhouse. Yeah. And it's a tiny scene, but Patrick Swayze has taken over as the cooler at the Double Deuce or whatever. And he's having his first team meeting and he says, we're going to be nice. And one of the bouncers says, well, what if someone calls my mother a whore? And his response was, is she? And this guy gets all angry. And I'm thinking, what a great lesson, because if she's not a whore, why do you care what they think? And I believe this deeply. When I react to something that someone says about me, the reaction comes from the part of me that believes it's true.
Absolutely. No.
Otherwise, it would bounce off me like, okay, yeah.
Like somebody looked at me and said, you have the ugliest 3 noses I've ever seen. Well, how can I possibly be offended by that? Because I know I definitely do not have 3 noses. So that's kind of what I tell myself in my head when I hear criticism. I'm like, did they just point out 1 nose you do have feelings about, or 3 noses that you know are not true?
Right. And I think that's a really hard acknowledgement, but that's been key to my work,
Good.
I really believe it. Whenever something triggers me, I stop myself and say, wait a minute, that just hit a part that I still believe that, even though my head says it's not true, because it's usually not as obvious as the three noses. It's that,
Yes, of course.
like for me, it's something usually it hits around my integrity. If it hits
Oh,
my integrity,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
still hits me
I
because
think
that's
the
been a
same
big
for
part
me.
of my journey.
I was raised by not Mother of the Year, and she had a regular habit of saying, "You will never have good friends because you're not a good person." And she said that the whole time I was growing up, and it's a tough one, man. You hear that when you're 50, 40, 30, 10, 50, 60. So yeah, if somebody says to me, "You lack integrity," oh, and then I have to think, wait a minute, my mother was wrong.
Well, the way I look at that is I've never had broken ribs, but I understand they're very painful. And as they're healing, I imagine you've got this healing process because transformation is a healing process. That's what it is. And as they're healing, someone, says something, and it's as if they jabbed you in that healing rib and you go like this.
Yeah.
The problem is they didn't actually jab us. What happens is I took whatever they said and I jabbed myself.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's the part of me that says, yes, you are that. And then I get mad at them.
Yes.
Or I choose to do my work. And that's the awareness. The unaware person blames them and says, how dare you? You're wrong.
Yeah.
The more awake person says, let me take a look at that. There's still some healing to do.
Yeah. Agree. So we've got I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. Anything you want to touch on before our last break?
Yeah, I haven't said this before. We've talked about discomfort. One thing I just started believing a few months ago is this, that great discomfort always precedes great outcomes. Great discomfort always precedes great outcomes. If there's not great discomfort, the outcome's going to be ordinary.
It's just
because
like
great outcomes are not lucky. They're based upon fundamental shifts that happen at some level, inside, outside, execution, whatever.
Yes, it's the transformational metaphor of no pain, no gain kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
That's why I use The Biggest Loser as an example, because once I feel the pain they're really in, I don't like it. But yet it's not going to do any good if I don't go through it. So I use that metaphor a lot in many places of my life. All right, I think we can take a break. And when we come back, we'll kind of wrap up with the best way people can use the tenets of your book. And I'm excited to finish it up then. See you in 3, guys. Welcome back. You're listening to My Turn Life Coaching, Reclaim Your Life with me, Rikki Schwartz. I have Jeff Nischwitz here talking about his book, Unmask, Let Go of Who You Are Supposed to Be and Unleash Your True Leader. In this last segment, Jeff, and for the next 7 or 8 minutes or so, I'd love to close out with your explicit views in your book with regard to empowerment of choices, big thing for life coaches, we use that a lot, empowerment of choices, and the key obstacles to embracing the power and existence of choices. Go.
Yeah. Well, I thought I had clarity on this, but it got crystal clear a number of years ago before the book came out, on a birthday, actually. And I was having a birthday party and there was a bunch of people around, and I'm known for my questions. So someone said, hey, Jeff, you're the question guy. Ask us a question you've never asked anyone before. Ooh. And so here's the question I came up with. And I love that. I'm like, challenge accepted. The question was, I said, I want you all to assume that you have to get rid of every belief system you have, every belief system, every philosophy. You can only keep one. And I said, it can't be a belief in a higher power, because I know a lot of you would choose that. So they went around, fascinating. And it came to me, and I said, my one is I always have a choice. Because with that one, it touches my entire life. And that is something I live and breathe. And I also know that's one of the beliefs that are the foundation for why I live with virtually no stress. Because when I find I'm looking for my choices in the situation, it could be attitudinally, it could be perspective, it could be action. And I know that I'm not stressed when I'm in some form of change effort. So my ownership of choices is the most empowering concept. And the piece that goes with it is, and this took a little longer, is, and COVID one of the reasons people were so shocked and shaken up is they didn't realize this was true, that we don't control anything except ourselves. Absolutely zero. Now, we have the ability to influence other things and people, but we have no ability to control anything except ourselves. And even then, some things, our emotions, we don't fully control, but we can catch them quickly. We can catch some things. Some things happen just instinctually. But this idea of choice is so simple, so empowering. And it basically says to me, Jeff, no matter what's going on, you have choices here. And I will tell you this, I'm part of a book right now, which is technically the 5th book. I'm working on my 6th this year. But the book that's coming out in a few weeks, I did a chapter. They said, what are 2 books that people have to read? And I've read a lot of books. And the 2 books I listed, one was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And the other one was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I only read that book 6 years ago. And I read that, and he was a psychologist, and he's a concentration camp survivor. Virtually his whole family died, including his wife. Yet he talked about how in those moments of every bit of loss that exists, we have the ability to choose our perspective. And that's how he says he survived. And I thought, if someone can survive a concentration camp emotionally by embracing that choice, I can navigate my life. And he's been like a beacon to me. And anyone that challenges us, say, go read the book, and then you come back and tell me about your rough day or how it's not true for you. Yeah. So it's about choices. And when I have a choice, then I know I can do something about the situation instead of sitting around letting the situation happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So give an example, if you can think of one, either personal or just metaphorically, because I think it's such an important concept, and we have about 3 minutes. So can you think of a good real life metaphor or example?
God, they happen all the time.
I know.
So I'll just share it this way. A lot of people talk about gratitude, and gratitude is a choice. And I feel like I've exercised my gratitude muscle so much that it's now my default. And what I say is I tend to see what is versus what I can make up about what is. Yeah. I also tend to see what is versus what's not there. So for example, Zoom is a great example. A lot of people are talking about Zoom fatigue. And I believe one of the reasons is when we go into a Zoom call, our primary thought is this isn't what I want. I'd rather be having coffee or a cocktail with you, Rikki. So I'm coming into this space with this is second. I'm settling for this. Yeah. Versus I choose to say, this is amazing. If we had to do this in person, it never would happen. And we're so far away, and it's great to connect you. You've been on my podcast. I've been on your podcast. Here we are doing this. So there's some gratitude in it, but it's the choice I make of what I actually see in front of me.
I get that.
And I choose to see what is instead of what's not there. That alone changes my entire life experience, just that change.
I love that. That's a perfect place to end before I do the closing. So thank you for that. Great example. So let's do some housekeeping. Can you first, Jeff, share your social media handles with the listeners or your contact info again? Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah, the easiest way, again, if you can spell my name, Nischwitz, Nischwitz, nischwitzgroup.com is the website. Jeff@nischwitzgroup.com is the email. If you Google Jeff Nischwitz, there's no others out there, which I'm lucky with that. Everything you find is going to be me. Find my newsletter, sign up, get my videos, get involved in the conversation.
They can also go to Amazon and look up your book, and the author's there too. So if they remember.
Well, they can, but the best way to get all my books is to come to my website and click books. And there you can get all of them there, including the one that's coming up soon.
Speaking of which, perfect segue. I want to remind our listeners that Jeff is giving away 3 free books. You can either contact him at the information he just provided, or you can call the studio at 800-930-2819 and tell the producer you'd like one of his free books, and we'll ship one out to you. I also want the listeners to know they can obtain your book both at your website, like you said, Jeff, or Amazon.com. And finally, Jeff, do you have any events to promote at this time? I know that with the pandemic, that's a much smaller answer than I'm sure would be the case, but any events?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a book launch coming out that I've got a chapter in on March 26th, but that is, if you're in the Tampa Bay area,
Okay.
that is an in-person event.
Cool.
I would just say sign up for things. I've got a few things that are rolling out in the next couple of weeks.
Good.
And actually, I do think of one. Here's one really quick. So next week, Thursday is March 18th. It's the beginning of March Madness with basketball. And
Okay.
I'm going to be doing this cool process called a challenge from March 18th to April 5th. I'm going to have all these things going on. And it's about bringing some madness to every day of your life.
Oh, I love that.
Do some things that feel like they're crazy,
I
whether
love
it's sales calls or whatever. So
Perfect.
join me for March Madness. Find me on Facebook. You'll find it there.
So I want to thank the listeners who took the time to listen to my flagship show. I cannot begin to tell you how much it means to me that you took time out to do that. Some of you have never heard of me. Some of you are being very loyal friends and colleagues. In any event, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your book with us. I had an incredible time, as I always do when I talk to you. And lastly, guys, if you enjoyed this interview with Jeff today, you are in for a treat, because I will be interviewing him again on my very next show, this time the fourth Wednesday of March 24th, same time, when we'll be discussing another one of his books, Just One Step, Walking Backwards to the Present on the Camino Trail. To discover in the book, which it's such a beautiful metaphor, he uses his own personal adventure. He hiked 200 miles down the Camino Trail. And during that hike, he realized he had unintentionally trapped himself into a life rut. And the only way to escape it was to figuratively and literally walk backwards for the last 7 days of his hike. It's beautiful. It's poignant. Last but not least, special thanks to my amazing producer, Jacob Capfist. Thanks. And finally, I'm going to close out this interview as I will every interview, with one of my favorite quotes related to life transformation. This quote is from a poem by one of my very favorite poets, Rainer Maria Rilke. So it's Czechoslovakian. It's called I Am Much Too Alone in This World, Yet Not Alone. In that poem, he writes, I want to unfold. I don't want to stay folded anywhere, because where I am folded is where I am a lie. Till next time, be thinking about what you can do to reclaim your life. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into My Turn Life Coaching with me, Rikki Schwartz. Now, before you go, ask yourself this question. At my memorial service, what do I want folks to say was my passion? What do I want them to say was my purpose? If you don't know, or you don't think they'll know, then it's time to say it out loud. It's my turn. Visit myturnlifecoaching.com today and let me help you reclaim your life.